For years, the Queen Mother's influence was buried beneath layers of tradition and silence. But now, from beyond the grave, a secret decree emerges, rewriting the royal succession and shaking the monarchy to its core. The contents? So explosive, even King Charles tried to suppress it. And it all centers around Princess Charlotte, not Camilla. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a quiet archival review inside the palace soon turned into something far more dangerous. Tucked inside a sealed envelope, marked in the Queen Mother's unmistakable handwriting, were words no one expected to read to be opened in a time of crisis. And according to those who have whispered about this document for decades, that crisis had finally arrived. The decree was not symbolic, nor sentimental. It was strategic. It named Princess Charlotte as the chosen bearer of a private inheritance long assumed to be destined for Camilla. Jewels, patronages, and something far more powerful than either legacy. For years, Camilla's position had grown steadily stronger, rehabilitated by public duty and carefully managed narratives. Yet behind closed doors, insiders claim the Queen Mother never softened. She saw the monarchy not as a platform for popularity, but as a bloodline to be guarded. In her final months, she reportedly spoke often of continuity, of protecting the essence of the crown from dilution. That essence, she believed, flowed through lineage, not loyalty earned through marriage. The document itself had been hidden within a private royal vault, separate from state archives, protected by layers of discretion that even senior aides were unaware of. Its existence resurfaced only when Prince William, reviewing estate inventories after a routine legal audit, stumbled across a reference that did not match any public record. Curiosity turned to disbelief. Disbelief turned to confrontation. Lawyers were summoned. Authenticators examined signatures. And what they found left no room for doubt. The Queen Mother's hand, steady and deliberate, had written Charlotte into a future that Camilla had long imagined for herself. The debate that followed was fierce. Was the decree ceremonial, a grandmother's preference dressed in royal language? Or was it binding, a final command from one of the monarchy's most formidable matriarchs? Advisors argued in hushed tones. Some warned of precedent, others warned of scandal. Yet beneath the legal wrangling lay a deeper truth. This was not simply about jewels or titles. It was about control over the narrative of inheritance. The Queen Mother had anticipated resistance. Her wording was precise, layered with references to tradition and blood right, leaving just enough ambiguity to ignite conflict, but enough clarity to guide those willing to honor her intent. And at the center of it all stood a young girl, unaware that her name had just become the fulcrum of royal tension. Princess Charlotte, still years from understanding the weight of such a decree, had unknowingly become the symbol of a legacy preserved against expectation. Camilla's assumed future had been quietly redirected, and the silence that once protected this secret was now unraveling. What began as a hidden testament was fast becoming a catalyst for division, because in a family where loyalty and power are inseparable, revelations do not land gently. They fracture alliances, reopen old wounds, and force every member to choose a side. But the royal family's walls don't just echo with secrets, they tremble with fury when they're exposed. Camilla believed she had earned her place beside the throne, years of loyalty, controversy weathered, and a public rehabilitation. But when the Queen Mother's decree surfaced, it shattered everything she thought she had secured. For decades she had moved carefully, rebuilding her image from the ashes of scandal, standing faithfully beside King Charles, and slowly carving a space that once seemed impossible. Her allies whispered of future honors, of royal jewels passed down, of patronages quietly marked with her name, of a legacy finally legitimized. The plan, at least in Camilla's mind, had been set in motion long ago, and at its center was the unspoken assumption that the Queen Mother's influence would eventually bless her rise. Instead, it rejected it publicly, painfully, and irrevocably. From the very start, the Queen Mother's relationship with Camilla had been distant, even cold. Palace aides recounted how formalities were strictly observed, but warmth was never extended. The Queen Mother, always a staunch believer in tradition, reportedly viewed Camilla as a disruption rather than an addition to the family fabric. Over the years, Camilla remained convinced that her steadfast presence and devotion would soften the family's stance, and perhaps it did, just not where it mattered most. When the hidden decree was revealed, it wasn't just a surprise, it was a direct blow to Camilla's long-held expectations. She had privately believed she would inherit select pieces of the Queen Mother's collection, brooches with historic lineage, tiaras whispered about among royal circles, and patronages steeped in generations of service. But none of that would come to pass. Instead, the heirloom path had been rerouted, and the destination was clear: Princess Charlotte. The pain wasn't confined to titles or jewels, it was the symbolism that stung. Staff reportedly overheard Camilla mutter the words that summed up her heartbreak: "It was always meant to be mine." She wasn't just watching a royal transition, she was watching her own history being erased before it could be written. And perhaps most devastating of all was the fact that Charlotte, still a child, had unknowingly eclipsed a woman who had spent years fighting for acceptance. Pride wounded, Camilla withdrew. Sources close to the palace described long silences, strained dinners, and a growing distance between her and the king. For Charles, the revelation placed him in an impossible position. Torn between the wishes of his late mother and the hurt of his wife, he remained publicly neutral but privately tormented. He knew what the Queen Mother's decision represented, and he understood what it cost. Yet even as Camilla struggled to absorb the humiliation, the world around her moved on. The media began buzzing. Insiders speculated, and the public, hungry for a new generation, welcomed Charlotte's symbolic ascension. The Queen Mother's decree had not only broken Camilla's hopes, it had cemented the monarchy's pivot toward youth, lineage, a blood-bound legacy. Her years of perseverance now hung in the balance. But if Camilla was wounded, it was William who delivered the dagger with a stunning royal confirmation. In a hushed council meeting behind palace doors, Prince William stood up, not just as a future king, but as a son, a father, and a protector of legacy. What he said next left the room in silence, and Camilla in disbelief. The atmosphere was tense. Senior royals, legal advisors, and trusted aides gathered under the pretense of routine estate discussions. But what unfolded was anything but routine. With measured resolve, William placed the aged parchment on the oak table, its edges worn, the Queen Mother's emblem unmistakable. Few in the room had known the document even existed. Fewer still expected what it contained. As a royal historian began reading the contents aloud, the air thickened. There was no ambiguity, no vague suggestion. The decree was explicit. Princess Charlotte was the sole intended recipient of the Queen Mother's personal legacy, and there, in her unmistakable handwriting, was the Queen Mother's signature. Bold, undeniable, irrefutable. The silence that followed was broken only by the scrape of chairs as council members shifted, stunned. For a moment, even Charles appeared frozen, his expression unreadable. But William spoke before questions could spiral. He declared with unwavering clarity that he would uphold the Queen Mother's wishes, that the document was not up for debate. Not now, not ever. His voice didn't shake. His resolve didn't falter. In that moment, William stepped fully into his future role, not merely as monarch in waiting, but as the moral anchor of the family. It was not vengeance, he insisted. It was respect. Respect for the woman who shaped the crown during its darkest hours. Respect for tradition. Respect for legacy that can't be rewritten by favor or feeling. Predictably, Camilla's advisors were quick to object. They argued the document's authority. They questioned its timing, its intent, even its legality. Some murmured that the Queen Mother had written it under emotional strain. Others dared to suggest it was never meant to see the light of day. But their protests fell flat in the face of history. Princess Anne, stoic and sharp, backed William immediately. Her allegiance to her mother's wishes was unwavering. Prince Edward followed, quietly but firmly aligning with his nephew. The unity in the room was undeniable, except from Camilla's corner. And William, sensing the fracture, delivered the final blow with striking poise. This isn't about revenge, it's about respect. And if we can't honor her word, then we stand for nothing." Those words reverberated long after the meeting ended, not just through the walls of the palace, but through generations of royal memory. This wasn't a power grab, it was a reckoning. William had not only confirmed the Queen Mother's secret decree, he had anchored the family's future to its past, making a statement that would ripple for years. Charlotte's path was no longer emerging, it was established. Camilla's expectations weren't just deferred, they were decisively denied. And as the news seeped through palace corridors, a new question surfaced. Why Charlotte? The world saw a bright young girl. The Queen Mother saw a monarch in the making. Long before anyone else imagined it, she had chosen Charlotte. Her reasons wrapped in a blend of intuition, legacy, and a quiet defiance of tradition. It wasn't a decision made in haste. In the twilight of her reign as the royal family's matriarch, the Queen Mother became observant in ways few understood. She watched closely, gathering impressions not from public appearances, but from the corridors of Balmoral, the quiet moments at Windsor, the silences between laughter at Sandringham. Among the youngest royals, one stood out not for showmanship, not for compliance, but for something deeper: composure, intelligence, presence. In Princess Charlotte, she saw echoes of her daughter Elizabeth, a firmness masked by charm and a stillness that commanded attention without asking for it. The Queen Mother, by then nearing the end of her life, was said to have kept journals, private reflections on the future of the monarchy, fears about its direction, and bold instincts about who might carry its legacy best. According to palace insiders, she believed strongly in the power of female continuity, a belief rooted in a century of watching the monarchy evolve and survive through queens, not consorts. Charlotte, even as a child, embodied something timeless. Sharp with her words, graceful in posture, and naturally attuned to royal protocol, she became more than just William and Catherine's daughter in the Queen Mother's eyes. She became the symbol of a new age, and so began a series of symbolic gestures, unnoticed by most. A locket gifted quietly during a private family gathering. A handwritten note folded inside an heirloom box, addressed only to my little Lionheart. And perhaps most stunning of all, her name, mentioned in sealed correspondences found Lai after the Queen Mother's passing. They were subtle, but together they painted a picture of premeditated purpose. It wasn't about undermining Camilla, it was about preserving something purer in the Queen Mother's view, an inheritance not tainted by scandal or strategic marriages, but passed down through the very bloodline she had once worked so tirelessly to protect. She saw Charlotte as the living embodiment of royal essence, regal by nature, not title, and while the world debated titles and roles, the Queen Mother was thinking in centuries. Her decision to elevate Charlotte wasn't born of sentimentality. It was strategic, powerful, and silent. But silence doesn't last forever. As Charlotte grew, the world began to notice the same things the Queen Mother once did: her posture during formal appearances, her ability to hold court in rooms filled with senior royals, even her interactions with foreign dignitaries, marked by a poise far beyond her years. Behind the public's admiration was something deeper, a sense that she wasn't just born into royalty, she was born for it. To those within the firm, it became harder to ignore. Charlotte was not merely next in line after her brother, she was emerging as a force unto herself. Her presence, her growing confidence, her instinctive understanding of her role, it all aligned perfectly with the Queen Mother's quiet prophecy. But not everyone celebrated this unfolding truth. For Camilla, watching Charlotte ascend not through titles but through reverence was a reminder of what would never be hers. Because while Camilla had fought her way to the top, Charlotte was being called there without asking. And as the crown leaned into a future, shaped by a child of legacy, not marriage, one woman's silence was giving way to fury. But behind the grace and legacy lies a brewing conflict, a royal woman scorned. She endured scandals, gained public sympathy, and stood beside the king. But what Camilla didn't expect was betrayal, not from strangers, but from the very heart of the firm she helped stabilize. For years she had weathered humiliation with restraint, accepted scrutiny without retaliation, and reshaped her image through relentless duty. Slowly, carefully, she carved out legitimacy. Every public appearance, every charitable speech, every carefully measured smile was part of a long redemption arc. And in her private understanding of that journey, there was always an unspoken reward at the end, a quiet recognition from the monarchy's deepest roots. The Queen Mother's legacy was meant to be part of that reward. At least, that is what Camilla believed. When the decree surfaced and her name was nowhere within it, the shock was not subtle, it was seismic. This was not merely about heirlooms or patronages, it was about validation, to be bypassed in favor of a child, however beloved, cut deeper than any tabloid headline ever had. Palace sources whispered that the moment Camilla learned the truth, her composure cracked. Not publicly, never publicly. But behind closed doors, the question slipped out, sharp and unguarded. Did you know? It was directed at Charles, and it carried years of tension inside it. Charles, for his part, found himself trapped between past and present. His mother's wishes were sacred, his wife's loyalty was personal. The weight of both pressed heavily on him. Those close to the king say he tried to soothe the situation, explaining that the decree predated their marriage, that it reflected a different era, a different set of priorities. But explanations offer little comfort when pride is wounded. Camilla had stood beside him when public opinion turned brutal. She had endured comparisons, whispers, resentment. Now, when she believed stability had finally been achieved, she was told silently that she would never fully belong to the lineage she fought to protect. Her family, fiercely protective, reportedly labeled the decision a disgrace to her service. They argued that Camilla's years of commitment deserved acknowledgement equal to blood inheritance. And in response, subtle efforts began circulating through the media, carefully worded statements, anonymous sources suggesting the decree was symbolic, not transformative, attempts to frame Charlotte's elevation as ceremonial rather than consequential. It was damage control disguised as diplomacy, yet beneath the surface, frustration simmered. Within the palace, tension thickened, conversations became guarded, invitations felt calculated. Princess Anne's unwavering support for William only deepened the divide. Other senior royals, reading the direction of history, quietly aligned themselves with the future rather than the present. Camilla could sense the shift. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it was undeniable. Influence was drifting, authority was recalibrating, and she was no longer at the center of the equation. For someone who had fought so hard to be accepted, exclusion felt like exile in slow motion. The betrayal was not theatrical, it was strategic, silent, final. And while Camilla grappled with the emotional fallout, the monarchy did what it has always done best: it moved forward without hesitation. Decisions once theoretical became operational. Plans once whispered became action. Because while hearts were breaking in private chambers, the machinery of legacy had already begun turning. But even as tensions flared, the crown's treasures were already moving hands. Deep within the palace, vault doors creaked open to reveal treasures once belonging to the Queen Mother. But what shocked observers wasn't the jewels themselves, it was who they were being sent to, and who was left off the list entirely. In a quiet operation shielded from the press, royal aides descended into the archive chambers, this time not for conservation, but for transfer. The Queen Mother's personal legacy, once preserved in velvet-lined drawers and glass cases, was being unearthed. But not for Camilla, not for tradition, for Charlotte. The Queen Mother's decree had explicitly named her great-granddaughter, and now, the instructions were being carried out with the weight of finality. The sapphires, once draped across royal portraits, the brooches that shimmered on state visits, the tiaras whispered about in aristocratic salons, they were all being catalogued, prepared, and reassigned to a child whose lineage now overshadowed every expectation. Those assigned to the task spoke of the care being taken, each piece matched against letters, each with instructions attached. There was no confusion. The will was clear. Charlotte was the intended heir, not just in spirit, but in possession. When Camilla caught wind of the transfer, she reportedly intervened, requesting the items be reviewed, re-evaluated, reconsidered. But the response from the palace was blunt: denied. For Camilla, it wasn't simply about jewelry, it was about erasure, about watching history slide out of her reach and into the hands of someone who never had to fight for acceptance. The decision had already been made, and now it was being made visible. Days later, Charlotte appeared in public wearing a brooch unmistakably linked to the Queen Mother one that hadn't been seen in decades. It wasn't just an accessory, it was a message, a declaration in diamonds. Royal insiders began calling it what it truly was, the quiet coronation of a future queen, not in ceremony but in symbolism, in shadows, not fanfare. Camilla, still technically queen consort, had been bypassed not just privately but publicly, and the press noticed. Headlines shifted. Features began to focus on Charlotte's composure, her lineage, her role in the future of the crown. Analysts began tracing the pattern one where Charlotte was slowly, deliberately being groomed for something far beyond ceremonial appearances. She was being positioned not as a spare, but as a sovereign in waiting. One whisper became a wave. This is not just about jewelry, this is about power. Every stone passed down carried centuries of symbolism, but now they carried something else: confirmation. The monarchy wasn't just evolving, it was correcting itself, returning to blood, to roots, to legacy. And as Charlotte quietly stepped into the Queen Mother's symbolic shoes, Camilla was left clutching a title that no longer commanded the reverence it once did. The palace had spoken, the jewels had moved, and history had shifted. And while the jewels changed hands, the true shift was one of power, not just possession. As royal factions emerged behind palace gates, it wasn't just Camilla who resisted the decree. Some feared the precedent, others feared the power shift. But Princess Anne had one goal: protect the Queen Mother's will, even if it meant clashing with her brother. From the moment William made the decree public within royal circles, the stability of the monarchy's private foundation began to quake. Allies were forced to reveal their loyalties. Silence was no longer an option. Anne, known for her stoic composure and unwavering loyalty to tradition, didn't flinch. Her position was clear, firm, and fierce. Mother's wishes must be honored, she reportedly told a stunned room during one tense meeting. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a line in the sand. King Charles, already caught between his wife's heartbreak and the obligations inherited with the crown, found himself cornered. His hesitation was apparent. To side with Camilla would mean defying the last written will of the woman who raised him. To side with Anne would mean further alienating the very wife who had fought so hard to stand beside him. It wasn't just a matter of jewels or sentiment anymore, it had become a moral crisis draped in royal protocol. Anne, however, refused to allow indecision to override duty. With every passing day, the divide within the family deepened. Princess Eugenie and Beatrice, long kept on the periphery of royal power plays, reportedly voiced their quiet support for Charlotte's rise. In Charlotte, they saw more than a symbol, they saw continuity, clarity, and perhaps the restoration of something the monarchy had long lost. Behind the scenes, palace lawyers began combing through the decree. Could such a document, unsigned by Parliament, concealed for decades, truly hold constitutional weight? The answer wasn't clear, but the emotional weight it carried was undeniable. And for Anne, that was enough. As legal teams deliberated and senior royals avoided one another in palace corridors, family gatherings became breeding grounds for passive-aggressive comments and icy silences. Old wounds reopened. Words once unsaid were now pouring out under the pressure of legacy and ego. In a particularly explosive moment, Anne is rumoured to have threatened to go public to release the decree herself if the palace dared bury it again. It wasn't a bluff. Those who know her say she meant every word. For Charles, that threat wasn't just a challenge, it was a nightmare. The crown thrives on control, on managing perception, on silence that protects dignity. Anne's defiance, if made public, would fracture the very illusion the monarchy relies on to maintain relevance. But what no one in that room fully understood was that the Queen Mother had already set the wheels in motion. The documents were real. The jewels had moved. The people had begun to take notice. And nothing, not Camilla's grief, not Charles's indecision, not even Anne's fury could slow what was coming. But even royal unrest couldn't halt what was coming next, a historic public move that stunned the nation. There was meant to be a ceremony, an official handover of a royal patronage. Camilla's name was printed on the program, but when the cameras rolled, it was Charlotte who stepped forward and Camilla who watched from the shadows. What had been planned as a routine event, a ceremonial nod to tradition, became a seismic moment in royal history. The Queen Mother's endowment, a prestigious royal patronage tied directly to her personal legacy, was expected to be symbolically handed to Camilla. It would have marked her final consolidation of influence, her crowning as the true inheritor of the Queen Mother's goodwill. But then something changed, quietly, deliberately, and without public explanation. The shift didn't happen in front of the cameras, it happened behind closed doors just hours before the event. A revised announcement was slipped to the press. Palace aides avoided questions, and when the curtains were drawn back, the nation watched as Princess Charlotte was introduced as the honoree of the Queen Mother's endowment. A new generation, a new face. A message sent in front of a global audience. Camila, who had been preparing for her moment, was nowhere to be seen. Sources close to the palace claimed she was livid, blindsided, and refused to attend the post-ceremony reception. Her absence spoke volumes. The woman once deemed controversial had rebuilt her image to claim a crown not just in marriage but in memory. And yet, in the moment where legacy could have solidified that ascent, the crown turned its back. Public reaction was immediate. The speculation, relentless. Commentators couldn't ignore the shift. Some called it a quiet coup. Others dubbed it the silent dethroning. Camilla's exclusion wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. A generational pivot was being broadcast under the guise of protocol, and social media exploded. Side-by-side comparisons of Charlotte and Queen Elizabeth I flooded every platform. The posture, the grace, the authority in her presence. Audiences saw not just a princess, but a sovereign in waiting, not one being groomed, but one already chosen. What should have been a routine handover became a defining moment in the monarchy's transition. It was not spoken aloud, no declaration was made, but the visual told the truth. Camilla, the reigning queen consort, had been benched. Charlotte, the child of destiny, had been handed the script. The silence surrounding the decision made it louder. The firm had shifted, and in the absence of protest or justification, it was clear this was no accident. This was design, a design years in the making, one that had finally broken the surface. And then, just as silence returned, William stepped forward to end all doubt. In a statement both regal and intimate, Prince William silenced speculation and sparked royal history. With just a few words, he elevated his daughter and gently closed the door on Camilla's ambitions forever. The moment had been carefully chosen, but the words felt anything but rehearsed. Standing at a podium flanked by lineage and legacy, William looked beyond the politics and pageantry of royalty. His voice didn't shake, and neither did his purpose. "My grandmother knew what the future needed," he said, "and she saw it in Charlotte. It was more than a declaration, it was a coronation wrapped in memory." With those words, he sealed the Queen Mother's vision not just as history, but as destiny. He spoke of values, of duty, of how the Queen Mother had always believed in strength carried quietly, in grace wielded like steel. He referenced not jewels or titles, but ideals, legacy not as ornament, but as obligation. In Charlotte, William explained, those values had not just been preserved, they had been reborn. He didn't need to say what was left unsaid. Camilla's name was never mentioned. And that omission, insiders say, was no accident. It was the final, silent judgment. Not a rebuke, not a punishment, but a confirmation that her chapter in this part of the monarchy's evolution had ended. Standing beside him was Catherine, a silent force whose presence echoed everything William said. Her pride in Charlotte was evident, her loyalty unwavering. She had remained silent through the storm, allowing the noise to swirl while she focused on legacy, on preparing her daughter for a future others had tried to claim. Her support gave weight to William's words. This was not just a father's endorsement. It was a family uniting behind a future that looked unmistakably different from the past. The public responded with resounding clarity. Polls surged. Headlines praised the balance of tradition and renewal. Social media lit up with declarations of support. not just for Charlotte, but for what she represented, a monarchy reborn through clarity, not confusion. No scandals, no shortcuts, just heritage made flesh. The people didn't just accept it, they celebrated it. The symbolism was powerful, the future was taking form, and as cameras captured Charlotte's composed smile, observers knew they were witnessing something rare and anointing by legacy, not ceremony. So the transition that began in whispers and shadows ended in daylight and silence. William had spoken, Charlotte had stepped forward, and Camilla, once central, now stood aside. There was no scandal, no fallout, only evolution, a new generation, walking the path once lit by the Queen Mother herself, now carried forward by the great-granddaughter she had quietly chosen long before the world understood why. As the dust settles, one truth remains: royal blood may run deep, but legacy runs deeper. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.